Fisker went out of business. Is Nissan the next one to go? Their sales have been in a literal tailspin. We've heard 99% of their profits were up in smoke in the first half of 2024. Global sales have dropped for Nissan in August by about 5.5%. And now we're talking 5 consecutive months of declining global sales for Nissan. Sales in China fell 24% as local competition also built, and US sales dipped another 0.1%. And while we've seen car manufacturers like Fisker go out of business, a lot of that had to do with quality control. They couldn't get their software, their programming right, allegedly. And unfortunately, it looks like a YouTube influencer absolutely didn't help the cause. But now we have Nissan also facing some quality control challenges, poor sales, incentives to the point where they're paying almost all of their profits directly to try to convince people how much people need to buy these vehicles. But in reality, a lot of the Nissan products, even though they have the Leaf and the Area, they're not really all that competitive. And not until 2025 are we expected to see a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid vehicle of the Nissan Rogue like we're looking at right here. Many years ago, Datsun and Nissan had a great product. They always came up with something new and fresh. They had trucks that were competitive. Their SUVs like the Pathfinder were all in the same space as the 4Runner, and they were always forced to be reckoned with. Then along came vehicles like the Z cars. They were also very much loved. I even had one myself, and I can attest they were a lot of fun. Unfortunately, this latest Z car feels like it's just a refreshed 370Z, and it wasn't enough to bring in the clientele. Also, the R35 GTR, even though it was full and hot to trot when it first came out many moons ago, it became a little long in the tooth and finally outgrew its welcome. Now, sadly, Nissan has nothing to replace it with. They're a little short on inventory and the quality of products that customers are looking for. Nissan just lacks the competitive advantage. Nissan has struggled with a lot of innovation, and the US and Chinese market totally combined sell about half of Nissan's product. Sadly, this last little while, 24% sales decline in the Chinese market alone was enough to literally put Nissan under. Seriously, because Chinese now have some very competitive products. The electric vehicle market is up and coming, and sadly, we don't see anything too fresh from Nissan coming on. They just can't compete. The US market as well, we're seeing GM, we're seeing Ford, and a lot of the US American made vehicles are also going down the path of electric vehicles as well as hybrid vehicles, i.e. the Maverick by Ford, and yet Nissan isn't not in the game, and that's not helping sales. And then what didn't help Nissan for a few years was when they started having quality control issues, like the Nissan Rogue. They had problems, of course, with the CVT transmission, which built by Jatco, unfortunately has a huge reputation for durability issues. Now they also have the variable compression engine, which also creates a lot of complexity, and a lot of their vehicles just don't inspire confidence from a reliability perspective when manufacturers like Toyota and Honda are building vehicles that are reliable, more advanced, and certainly feel like more of a risk buying a Nissan product, which feels to be very untried. Further compounding the issue is Nissan had a whole pile of inventory, 2023 model year vehicles on their lot, brand new, that haven't sold yet, and yet they were bringing out 24s. They could not sell the new old stock, so that means huge incentives. They were trying to almost give away some of their brand new old stock 2023 model years, and that just put them in a world of hurt. And because of that, that's where this 99% profit loss came from. They were trying to incentivize getting customers to buy. They were also offering the dealers $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 to actually take that vehicle, the older model, and they were heavily pushing the sales of some of their 1- and 2-year-old brand new vehicles that were already obsolete. And I found some US statistics here, what's going on for sales. They're saying the third quarter stats, they're down about 2.2%, as well as the Nissan division for sales, 1.4% in the whole. 12.1%. Infinity has gone down in terms of sales. Because of many of the heavy incentives that we're finding here, Nissan actually pushed a lot of their products. And some of the biggest losers right here, the Maxima, lost about 95.7% in a quarter. They also lost about 8.5% on the Altima, about 64% on the Nissan GTR. The Kicks was down almost 6%, and the Armada sunk like a rusty ship, down about 21%. But yet they saw some big increases in this last quarter, and a large reason for that is the heavy incentives. But that's where all their profits went. Heavy marketing, heavy incentives, just to try to push these products out the door. And as a result, the Versa, the Sentra, And the Z represented some of the biggest winners for Nissan. So it appears that Nissan's throwing money at it left, right, and center just to incentivize the sales of a lot of their cars. But how long will this possibly take for Nissan to continually throwing money at problems, trying to sell their cars, pitching heavy incentives, heavy networking, heavy marketing? They've even had to pitch extra incentives to workers, sales, networks, dealerships. So Nissan, once they were the thriving company from Japan that everybody wanted. They had interesting models, great competitive vehicles at a competitive price, and they were reliable. Then along came some of their Jatco transmissions. They had some other issues, and then of course they just stopped producing vehicles that were desirable to people. Their trucks just weren't that dependable, and people no longer wanted these vehicles. These were vehicles that they had to buy, not necessarily because they wanted to buy it, only because there was a cost advantage to buying something like this. Meant that most people just looked at this like value add. It's an opportunity to get one of the lowest cost SUVs on the market. That's how they're selling these vehicles. They're selling the vehicle because they're making these vehicles hard to ignore with the sheer price of the incentivized new rates. And according to Chevy sales, they've actually outsold Nissan at a rate of about 2-to-1 in the second quarter of 2024, highly displaying the sales deficiency that Nissan is going through right now. They're going to need a lot more push and a lot more interesting vehicles to get hopefully people back into the brand. So Nissan, even though they're down 70% since the same time last year in terms of overall US sales, it clearly dictates what's going on. Nissan is struggling to sell their products. They don't have product lines that are that enticing to a lot of customers, therefore sales are dropping. And while they're selling certain models like the Z car, that's only because a lot of those specific models are becoming highly incentivized, and some of them are seasonal specific. But realistically, a lot of these products you're finding by Nissan simply are not selling. Not enough. 70% sales loss, 5.5% recent. They're clearly not in a good place, and it's going to take a major resurgence and a major miracle to bring Nissan back to the forefront where they're competitive. Sure, they've got some new models where they're looking at introducing here in the next little while, possibly a plug-in hybrid and some other interesting vehicles that have some changes to them, but it's still a lag effect. They're still going to take some time to get that vehicle to market, research developed, and they get people to not just buy them because they're heavily incentivized, but buy them because they're interesting and people actually want them. What do you all think over there? How do you think Nissan's going to get through this? Do you have any ideas as to how they're going to manage this, pull themselves out of this proverbial pocket and this hole? It's going to be an interesting time. Definitely check those videos out. They're going to tell you a little bit more what's going on in the market as a whole. If you've been shopping, hope to see each and every one in the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.